just do the pledges and everything else. I'll do the moment of silence. Good evening. We want to welcome our viewers to the Johnson City Government Information Channel on Charter Cable Channel 192 and Comcast Cable Channel 17 to this live telecast of the September 11, 2018 Johnson City Regional Planning Commission meeting. This meeting will be rebroadcast on Friday, September 14, 2018 at 12 p.m. At this point, we'll go ahead and call the meeting to order, and we'll ask Commissioner Weiss to go ahead and start with our pledges and our prayer.
Before we offer our prayer, I want to acknowledge the passing of one of our city commissioners, Ralph Van Brocklin, in the past week, and ask that before we have our invocation, we have a moment of silence in his memory. Now let us pray. God, we thank you for the opportunity to govern ourselves, to serve our community, and to exchange ideas freely and without fear. We thank you for this body of volunteers who have gathered here to serve Johnson City and all the citizens who make Johnson City the city that it is. We pray that you'll bless these deliberations and that they will be fruitful. We pray all this in your most holy name. Amen.
Amen.
You'll join me in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, sir. Again, I want to welcome everybody here to our meeting. And it is a somber occasion for us. We're very thankful to be able to be here because of not only the sacrifices made by people continuing to serve our country. Remembering today is 9/11, and we want to be thankful that we can even sit here and conduct our business freely, the civic business, in the way that we do in our country. So I'm very thankful for that. Also, I think there are some here that might wish to express a few thoughts regarding Commissioner Van Brocklin and his passing, and I want to open up the floor for that right now.
I would just like to, I read an interesting tweet, I guess, earlier today as far as how we forget to thank the ones that are closest to us. And I was never had the opportunity to thank Dr. Van Brocklin for all the service that he did. You always think there's going to be another day to do that. I was gracious enough that he appointed me to 2 different boards. And although we didn't always agree, I always respected his opinions and his leadership. So with that, I pray for his family and for those who knew him best. So we will miss him. Thank you.
I'll echo your sentiments, Jamie. I, too, was appointed to 2 boards by Dr. Van Brocklin, and I had the pleasure of meeting him when we both did Johnson City 101 back in 2007 together. And I have respected him ever since, and I'm very sorry to say the last time I had a chance to really talk to him was when he came over to my house to take down his sign when he ran for county commission out of my yard. But he was certainly a mentor.
I have some of the same experiences. He's the one, whenever I decided I wanted to be able to find out how I could serve the city, he sat down with me for 2 to 3 hours and just asked me questions and talked to me and mentored me, and that's how I began to find ways to serve, and he's the one who called on me to serve 2 different boards as well. And so I always have, again, just warm memories for him, and I did see an example of service. I mean, he would be at meetings that he wasn't required to be at. I knew how much time he was putting into it, and there's always a very sincere heart of service. And so it's a sad day, and we certainly want to let everybody know that we remember it. Anybody else? No? Thank you. Let's go ahead and move on with the approval of our agenda today.
So move.
Move. And a second. Okay. And all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Next will be approval of our minutes from the September 30, 2018 meeting.
So moved.
Motion. And second. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. And next, we'll move on to our new business for today. The first will be the rezoning of the property located at 2833 East Oakland Avenue. Mr. Manley.
Good evening. The first item before you tonight is for a rezoning of property located at 2833 East Oakland Avenue from B4 Planned Arterial Business District to R4 Medium Density Residential. The property, which is also known as The Range, was constructed in the late 1700s or early 1800s on the banks of Knob Creek, and up until recently had been used as an event hall. The petitioner is proposing to utilize the property as a single-family home to go back to its historical use. And that single-family home is an allowed use within R4. The property is bordered by R4 to the south and to the west, and it fronts a collector street. The concept plan was required, but because there are no changes being proposed, there's not much there, but it does meet the requirements. They held their neighborhood meeting, and that was advertised on time with sufficient time. And as you saw in one of these, it is in the middle of a floodway, but as long as they're not building anything or adding to the house, then that really isn't a factor at this point either. So staff, one last thing, the land use plan calls for this stretch to be commercial, and the R4 zoning district allows some commercial activity that this property would qualify for, and so it's not losing its all of its business potential by zoning from a business district to a residential district. And again, it neighbors an R4 district and an R3 district, and so this would basically be an extension of the neighboring R4 district. And as a single-family use, would also be extending its historic use, and I think give the property a better chance for its preservation. We'd like to see it be designated as a local landmark at some point because of its age and relevance to the history of this city. So staff recommends approval.
Thank you, Mr. Manley. Do we have any questions for staff? Seeing none, we'll go ahead and open up public comment for this.
Actually, I do, sorry. The B4, is that just what was applied from the very beginning? How did that zone get applied to this parcel?
I think that's to use it as an event hall.
Oh, it was for that use?
Yeah.
Okay.
Since it fronted the collector street, it was accepted as a business use.
Anybody else?
Would you say that area is kind of in transition anyway? Didn't we look at some properties earlier on
The R4 beside it has been approved as for apartments, but this immediate area it's got Knob Creek. There's also several other springs. There's a lot of water that comes down from Rome Street and some of the higher developed areas closer to the interstate. A lot of water passes through here, and so I think that's going to be a factor in the long term for this specific area. And I'm not sure what the status is of those apartments. They've been addressed, but they have not started moving forward with any kind of site plan or anything like that. So,
Thanks, sir.
yeah.
Good questions. Anybody else? Seeing none, we'll go ahead and open up public comment. Speak for or against the rezoning request. And I don't see motion, so we'll close the public comment section and open up for discussion on the board.
Make a motion to approve.
Motion for approval. Do we have any seconds?
Second.
We have a second. Thanks, Mr. Harrell. Any further discussion? Seeing none, we'll go ahead and call the roll, please.
Commissioner Lowe?
Yes.
Commissioner Williamson?
Yes.
Commissioner Wise?
Yes.
Commissioner Pavlich?
Yes.
Commissioner Wild?
Yes.
Commissioner Harrell?
Yes.
And Chairman Zilens.
Yes.
Motion approved.
Thank you. All right, we'll move on to our next item on the agenda, which is the rezoning request number 1031, KLM Drive.
Yes, the second action before you tonight is this request for a rezoning for KLM Drive, which is off of Boones Creek Road in North Johnson City. The current zoning is I-1 Light Industrial, and the proposed zoning is R4 Medium Density Residential. It is a vacant piece of property that's 4.58 acres. The petitioner is proposing to construct 23 three-bedroom townhouses, each with a one-car garage. The surrounding land uses, this is part of a commercial office complex that is accessed off of KLM Drive. This is one of the parcels that is within that development, the Boones Creek Corporate Park. The KLM Drive was developed as a collector street for commercial traffic as part of this office park, which was a mix of commercial use and the industrial use as it is zoned now. The property has a floodway on the southern portion of the property, and the future land use map shows this as being a commercial area. That section of Boones Creek all the way from I-26 to the west to all the way just past its intersection with North Roan Street to Boones Creek itself is all zoned for, or is all, the future land use plan calls for that to be commercial uses. The land use plan goes on to state a couple other important objectives that relate to this. Objective 2.1, promote policy that protects property values and enhances the quality of life and responds to the needs of future development. The land use element provides the following action statement: support the rezoning of vacant land to or from commercial and industrial uses based on market demand, transportation impact, access, and compatibility with surrounding land uses in conjunction with long-range objectives. So staff is looking at this as kind of a basis for how we're evaluating this. It also states that promote infill and redevelopment within the city to revitalize unused or underused property while promoting the preservation of viable and affordable housing stock. The land use plan outlines the following criteria in regards to locating infill development: promote higher density developments in locations which provide proper access to the existing transportation system, available school capacity, available water and sewer capacities, and compatibility with the existing land use. And so by looking at the surrounding land uses, the Boones Creek Corporate Park, and some of the B4 zoning, which is there now, and we look at KLM Drive and the collector street capacity that it was constructed for, and the compatibility of a residential use with those industrial surrounding land uses, which are industrial, and the existing commercial office space, how do they relate to one another? We do promote the a mix of uses, but I'm not exactly sure that these types of uses are compatible with one another. So based on the standards set forth by the future land use plan, the future land use map, transportation issues, and compatibility with surrounding land uses, staff does not believe that the requested rezoning is appropriate.
Thank you, Mr. Manley. Any further information for us at this time?
Not at this time. Any questions?
Any questions from the staff, from the commission?
It said that in your report that you had one phone call Was it positive, negative, or just
Information gathering.
information gathering?
Yeah.
And if this were to go in terms of a buffer, would it be a type 1, type 2?
The R4 would not require a buffer. There would be R4 to the south. It would be the lower impact use of the surrounding property, so it would not require a buffer. If any buffer was required, especially along the floodplain, the floodplain would serve as the buffer, and no additional investment would have to be made.
Okay. Thanks, sir.
I will add, the one place where it has residential adjacent to it, but is south of the creek. And so that break between these two, between the commercial uses as they're called for in the long-range plan and the existing residential, which is on the south side of the creek, this is trying to basically say we want to bring residential across that natural barrier, to bring residential, which is, again, the residential to the south of the creek is accessed from Bart Green Drive, which is south of the creek. This residential use would be accessed from the north, from Boones Creek Road. And so that's, those, while they may connect on a zoning map, and the parcels may touch each other, there's a lot of separation when it comes to the reality that's experienced on the ground and how traffic is going to be interacting and mingling with commercial traffic, and the traffic associated with the surrounding area on Boones Creek and the office park itself.
Any further questions for staff? We may have some more for you after.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Manley. At this time, we'll go ahead and open up the floor for discussions for or against this rezoning. I think we know you. If you can give us your name and address, please, sir.
My name is Dan Eldridge, 170 John France Road.
Thank you, sir.
Critical to know private citizen Dan Eldridge.
Yes. For 11 days. Thank you. No, thank you for allowing me to speak on this tonight.
Thank you.
This is actually part of a development that we started in 1998. KLM Drive was developed along with the commercial office uses that are there today. In 2003 or 4, I bought what's seen on your left picture, and it looks like 3 tracks. It was actually about 10 acres. I bought that. It was a canyon, a deep canyon, about 25 feet deep, and had the property on the other side that joined Old Gray Station Road. I moved all the dirt from the other side, filled in the canyon, and subdivided it into 3 lots at that time. The front 2 lots were immediately sold, and the rear lot, believe it or not, has been for sale since 2004. And I have yet to have an offer on it. And I have reduced the price on that property from the most recent sale being at the end of KLM Drive. That sale was last year that we made, and I have now reduced the price on this property. As a matter of fact, reduced the price 2 years ago to half of what I sold the other property for. Again, still no offers. And, quite frankly, we've been paying taxes on that property as developed commercial land since 2004. Spent a lot of money developing it, and I need to put it to use. And that's where we came up with the idea, recognizing that there is a lot of demand for residential right now, clearly no demand for the commercial. And so we've proposed a residential development that's, it's multiple units. The plan does show 23. It may end up being as few as 20. but we would like to do that on that property. It's very well suited for it. As you see, the property joins the creek on two sides. It does join R4. That R4 actually does access Boones Creek Road via Quality Circle.
Yeah.
The property, a substantial amount of it is in the floodplain, which obviously really limits its use, particularly for commercial. However, that is quite an asset for residential, because that whole creek frontage can be, and our intent, of course, is to make that a landscaped and grassed area that will be an asset to the residential development. So we believe that actually what we've proposed is a very suitable and complementary use to everything else that's been done there.
Mr. Elder, do you mind if I ask you a question?
No, not at all.
Thank you.
I'd
No.
be surprised if you didn't.
Well, I appreciate you and coming and exploring the history of this with us to help us understand this. Of course, we have the land use plan, the 2020 land use plan that we're looking at here, and this is a nice interchange off of the interstate. This is sort of the new developed area. I don't have to tell you that because it's yours. You've been working on it. And we
Bought
wanna-
my first piece of property in Boones Creek in 1990. I have been waiting on it to develop for 30 years.
So I'm looking at this area, and as the land use plan has this nice little red blob here with all this access off of Boones Creek that would suggest a sort of a coherent thought of this is a business commercial district. One of the stumbling blocks I think that I'm having mentally with it is just understanding how the R4 is going to impact a potential professional business park right here in this area and all the implications thereof of an R4. If you have, as it changes in character over the next 15 or 20 years, not just right now, but what are we looking at for residential being in the middle of this park here, or at least in the back? I thought about it fronting the creek and how that, and it being near a floodplain, that those things are certainly amenable to using residential, and that makes sense, and I could see where that would even be attractive. But I just wanted to get your opinion on how this works whenever it is sort of, it's going to break up a block in the land use plan north of a defined barrier, which is the creek, so.
Well, but at the same time, it's at the end of a dead-end street. It's not visible from the corridor, Boones Creek Road, not even close to visible, not only from the standpoint of the horizontal distance, but also vertically, this property lays well below all the other property that has been graded. So as far as a visual impact, there's none. You're going to have to drive down that street to even know those units are there. From the standpoint of, of the other use, quite frankly, it's just from our perspective, I used to develop a lot, and I have tried for years to develop this property, and there is no appetite for it when you consider the amount of land that's available once the floodplain is considered. It really just isn't a very attractive piece of land, particularly given the fact that it doesn't have any visibility.
Can we go back to the other map, please, Matt? And
This one?
Stacy, do you have a question?
No, not yet. I'm still thinking this through.
And this is for staff. When we look at overlay districts, and I know that we have a visual map that we're using, but like when we look for commercial versus mixed use on our setbacks, what is the distance that we usually go back from the road?
So our overlays are 300 feet.
300 feet, right?
Yeah. And then if any portion of a parcel is touching within that, then it would be included, but it's for basically multifamily and more intense. So a single family, it wouldn't apply, the standards wouldn't apply to that. But this is outside of that distance from the overlay on Boones Creek.
It's outside the 300 feet, correct? So, based on what you're saying, if he had a higher intense use, it would be better?
No, it's outside of that corridor. Are you, Are you saying that the overlay creates a mix of uses and that this is a mixed use, or?
What I'm suggesting is if we look at 300 feet from road frontage, then couldn't that lot be developed as something else other than commercial?
If it's within
The overlay does not
within the scope.
impact whether it's residential or commercial. It's over top of whatever the underlying zoning is. So that overlay doesn't necessarily dictate use.
Design standards.
It's a design
and
standard.
setbacks and.
Yeah.
And
So-
the design standards don't apply
To use.
certain residential uses.
To low- yeah,
So
lower
even if
intensity
they are in the
residential
300,
That's
they
not
would be
gonna-
exempted.
Okay.
So important about that is the overlay is only on particular corridors. KLM Drive doesn't have an overlay. You have the corridor overlay on Bones Creek Road.
I guess our tenants next door have been notified about the rezoning, and we didn't hear anything back from them, is that right?
No.
And no one came to the meeting.
The only other, just to kind of follow up on a comment I was making earlier, is that we do encourage mixed use. We want to provide opportunities to reduce car trips and let people make things more walkable, maybe even live-work scenarios. And the way that this is developed, staff did not think that adding residential was necessarily compatible in terms of creating mixed use because of the office complex type of development.
I understand.
If those were coffee shops and restaurants or, maybe in a variety, more of a variety of uses that would make it an appealing place to live, where you could access those places by foot, or possibly, if you worked there, if you worked at that office, you might be, intrigued to live across the street and reduce your commute quite a bit. But it's not a typical mixed-use
Well,
scenario.
the office on the bottom right, isn't that like a school? Isn't that part of a school?
Department of Corrections is in one of those buildings. I don't know the
Used
exact
to be like
function of
part
that
of Northeast
office.
State or something years ago.
Used to be the computer place.
It's not industrial.
Bailey Computer.
Bailey, yes.
All right. That's
Same
it.
guy owns both of those. We sold both buildings to an investor out of Kentucky.
Okay.
Who owns the two lots above it?
Let's see, the one that fronts Boones Creek Road is Gary Alexander, the developer in Kingsport, and the one in the middle is also in Kingsport. It's a Andy Brooks. It's his family. Andy passed away. So it's his family. And I understand that, was it last month that
BZA
Gary
just,
Alexander
yeah, we
asked
just
for something on
approved
his?
storage units on that top lot. And that's what I'm having a tough time getting my head around, that I like the appeal of having the residential next to the creek and with the floodplain and all there. But I can't get my head around having it just one lot over from the storage units.
You don't need to rent a truck.
That's true.
Wouldn't build very big closets.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's incentivized. You and Gary ought to get together and figure out a way to short people on their storage.
That's why it's only a one-car garage.
Yeah.
It is, that's right. These are, with proposed as one car.
We're getting.
Thank you. Do we have any more questions for Mr. Eldridge?
I guess I still look at KLM, and again, I don't know the two vacant lots above you. It's hard to imagine what they end up looking like. Storage units, I can imagine. I'll come back to that for staff as far as what the design requirements were in that overlay as to what the storage units will look like. Will they just be metal buildings? Or what were the design standards on the Boones Creek?
Brick facade, doesn't it?
I don't know, it's a different overlay. And so then my question, I guess, for the petitioner is, how do you, like right now you turn down KLM Drive and it's Office Park, and it looks like Office Park, and the whole road and the name of the road and the the appearance of the Big Boones Creek Business Corporate Park out there. How do you make the transition into 20 residential units at the end of the road? Like, what do you do with the frontage on KLM to say, psych, it's residential? You know, how does it present in your thinking?
Well, what we're going to have is a landscaped entrance. If you look at the site plan, there is, we don't have units backing up close to KLM Drive. So you're going to have a landscaped entrance that will go into the residential area. I don't think that, I believe because of the difference in topography, the site that we're proposing to do this on is significantly lower. We didn't fill this 4.5 acres. We filled.
But they're terraced, aren't they? Are the lots terraced?
No, the front two lots are basically level. And then this particular property, this 4.5 acres, was not graded, so it's substantially lower in elevation.
So did staff know, like, what limitations on the appearance of storage would exist? And not to interrupt your comments, sorry, I just was curious what the implications would be for that lot.
So for the corridor overlay, storage units are located perpendicular to the primary public right-of-way. Has to include decorative fencing. The colors utilized for all buildings shall be compatible earth tones. So those were some of the types of.
But there's not a material requirement of any
Not
sort?
like it's not like the design overlay where you have 75% brick.
Yeah, I remember asking about, they showed me a sample of the design. It's a metal that's made to look speckled, spotted, I don't know how to describe it. Because I asked about that.
There is prohibition. There is not a requirement of what you have to use, but there is prohibition of
Right.
what you cannot use.
No vinyl siding, no concrete block, unpainted concrete block, metal siding, things like that. So
Is this
it prevents that.
binding concept plan with this rezoning request?
Is this? Yes, it would be.
It would be a binding concept plan.
Yes.
Okay.
And if, there was some discussion about reducing the number of dwelling units, that might can be approved by staff since it's not increasing the number of dwelling units. If it was an increase, it would definitely have to come back and be reapproved. But to reduce, we'd have to look a little bit closer at that. Don't have to come back for.
And the reason why I say it may reduce to as few as 20 is, obviously, we've not done a final grading plan, but there's, this is a challenging piece of property, and the final grading plan is really going to dictate the number of units, and it could be as few as 20.
And I don't know if y'all recognize the area, but the property to the right of the lowest commercial building, isn't that the old barn property where they do events
It is.
and whatnot?
That's right.
That's correct.
So, I
So
mean,
is it
it's,
stubbed out? They're not, I'm sorry,
It does not continue on around. There's.
Is it?
but is it stubbed out that it theoretically
could.
envisioned that it would?
Well, it theoretically could have, and that was the intent. However, the lot at the end of the stub has now been purchased and a building built there. So
That's kind of a problem.
it's going to be a dead end from now on.
All right.
so, well,
Is
I
it-
guess
is it
my
the
point
animal
was, is there's
hospital
quite a
that's in
bit
the
of,
No, the animal hospital front's old gray station.
Right, I thought that was further down. I was just thinking off the frame. Okay.
you see my point? I mean, there's a lot of,
So which one
It's a
is?
unique property.
Yeah,
Old Gray Station intersection is right here, and then Roan Street is over here. Here's KLM Drive. So it did dead end and prevent that from connecting to Old Gray Station. And just to clarify, the concept plan, as long as it is not proposing to increase in intensity or density, then it can be approved by staff, changes can be approved by
If the
staff.
petitioner sells the property, then and it's zoned R4, can anybody come in and just put anything they want to there, or does it, the concept plan binds to the?
The
property?
concept
That's mine.
is, so if they were to submit a site plan, we would look at the concept plan to make sure that it is in line.
Okay.
Oh, I think if he were to build this site, he will have to build it to this concept plan. If he sold this property, let's say 2 years down the line, and he sells this property to some other person entirely, and we don't even end up with, there are other uses that are permitted in the R4 district.
That's what I was getting
Yeah,
at.
you don't even end up with a multi-family apartment there, then that other use will not be a change in the concept plan. That's an interesting thing in the code.
So that's
So
kind of what I was getting
his
at.
concept plan is binding to what he wants to do. If he sells this property 1 year, 2 years down the line to some other person who comes in, let's say they want to do, I think a bed and breakfast will be permitted in the R4 district.
Unless it's built before 1864.
Yeah.
But hypothetically.
Then at that point, that new developer will not have to come in and do a new concept plan for that particular project.
As long as it was in kind with what he's decided. He couldn't just go in and do R4, whatever he wanted in R4 at that point, is that right?
Or is it once it's
Or
zoned
does it,
R4,
once the
he
property
could do
changes
anything?
hand, does that concept plan no longer bind?
The
And
concept,
zoning.
no, what is binding in the concept plan is this particular project he's proposing.
Right.
Is binding. If you have some other project comes in, totally different from, this is not multi-family, let's say it's a bed and breakfast, it's going to be one building with a parking lot, 20 parking spaces out there, that's totally different.
Right. So
This concept plan would no longer be valid.
exactly. That's what I was getting at. It's really a zoning plan, not a use deliberation. It's a zoning deliberation. Okay. Any further questions for Mr. Eldridge? Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, sir. Do we have anybody else here wishing to speak for or against this rezoning? Okay, seeing none, we'll go ahead and close the public comment on it and open up for discussion on the board.
I've always been a proponent of commercial use bordering Boone's Creek itself. With the setback to the property over 300 feet, I can kind of see a mixed use being viable, especially since there's uses that are adjacent being buffered by a creek. That's just kind of where I'm at. I know I've looked at it and said how much light industrial we had left within the city, and I think that's a minimal, but I'm also a realist. So I'll just do a jump off point and make a motion to accept.
Okay. We have a motion to approve. Do we have any other motions or a second or discussion?
I'll go ahead and second, because I think Mr. Eldridge makes a strong argument.
So we have a motion and a second. Now it's ready for discussion, and I will take a moment to discuss, Mr. Eldridge. I had a real hard time getting my head wrapped around trying to avoid spot zoning, trying to avoid, we want to take this whole concept seriously, that we want this long-term plan to look uniform, and I think as we see a development in its infancy, it's real easy to make a mistake, and it's easier to go back and backfill small zoning problems later on. However, this is right on a transition zone. Mixed use is a good idea. This is right on a floodplain essentially, and residential makes sense. It's well back from the overlay from the street. Those are good points. It sounds like it's going to be a quality development that won't take away from a business park feel or a future of a business commercial development there. So it was one of those ones, that's exactly why I feel like we have a board, is so that we can think about this logically and not just rubber stamp it based on just what we read an ordinance to be or a land use plan to be. And so where I was not sure about this, I would land on the side of being in favor of it. That's just my discussion for the board. Any further discussions or comments?
Yes, I would agree.
Okay.
I think I, like you, was probably somewhat opposed prior to your presentation, but I think you make some very valid points. And considering the adjacent properties and the length of time that this has been marketed unsuccessfully,
Well, we can
I
take
think
market
that-
into consideration, that's for sure.
yeah, I think this is a good proposal, so I'm supportive of it.
Seeing no further comments or discussion, we will call the roll.
Okay, this is the motion to approve.
Yes.
Commissioner Lowe?
No.
Commissioner Williamson?
Yes.
Commissioner Wise?
I'm going to abstain because I have to vote on it again, either way, probably.
Commissioner Pavlich?
Yes.
Commissioner Wild?
Yes.
Commissioner Harrell?
No.
And Chairman Zając.
Yes.
Okay, the motion is 4 approve, 1 abstain, 2 against. Motion is approved.
Thank you very much. Moving on to the next item of the agenda. Will be the preliminary plat for the cottages at Cedar Creek. We'll have to skip over one in our packet to get to it.
Let me make sure everybody's there before I begin. Thank you, sir. The developer is proposing to construct this piece of property, cottages at Cedar Rock Phase 2, and develop single-family residential lots for this particular project. Phase 1 of the project involved the construction of single-family units on adjoining Suffolk Road. That has been completed. That was already approved, final plat approved. And what he's proposing now is a preliminary plat to construct another set of single-family lots on that piece of property. Initially, he submitted a concept plan for this piece of property. It was rezoned from B4 to RP3. So that rezoning has gone through and approved by the City Commission. The preliminary plat very much conforms with the concept plan. The preliminary plat is the same as what was submitted for the concept plan, except that I think by an error of the surveyor in submitting the preliminary plat, he tweaked off the feature for the trail. That is the only element. So it meets all zoning requirements in terms of density, meets all subdivision requirements. The street is proposed as a lane, or be a lane, meets subdivision requirements. We have utilities available on this piece of property. Staff recommends approval subject to the trail being provided as approved on the concept plan.
Thank you, sir. Do we have any questions for staff? No? All right. Do we have any public comment speaking for or against the preliminary plat approval for Cedar Rock Phase 2? Seeing none, we'll go ahead and move on to discussion and on the board. Any motions? That's okay, keep talking, somebody's got to talk.
Motion.
Oh, you
Make a
need-
motion to approve.
Motion for approval,
We have to
second
do-
from Mr.
Do you
Do we have
want
to
to,
include the
Commissioner
bonds
Paul?
do you want to
with the
include
approval?
the
No,
re-edition of the,
the bond doesn't
Walking
apply in the
path or not?
preliminary plat.
no,
Cottages at Cedar Creek, Cottages at Cedar Rock Phase 2, preliminary
we'll
plat
make it subject
approval.
to the addition of the walking trail.
I do.
Subject, so we're going to, the motion and the second is to approve, subject to
You're welcome.
the addition of the walking trail amenity.
Second.
All right. Please call the roll.
Okay. Commissioner Lowe?
Yes.
Commissioner Williamson?
Yes.
Commissioner Wise?
Yes.
Commissioner Pavlich?
Yes.
Commissioner Wild?
Yes.
Commissioner Harrell?
Yes.
And Chairman Zając.
Yes.
Motion to approve, subject to the addition of a walking
Walking trail.
trail.
Thank you. All right, so our next item on the agenda is Duncan's Retreat subdivision request for final plat approval. Mr. Bernard.
This project was before the Planning Commission in 2017 for preliminary plat approval. Plat was approved. It basically consists of single-family residential lots, 21 lots in Section A. There's a piece of property over Carroll Creek Road. So Section A adjoins this subdivision. Chatswood Lane will be extended into this subdivision. And then Section B consists of 17 lots, rural lots. That is minimum lot size 2 acres. This is Section A of the subdivision. The plat meets subdivision regulations and zoning requirements. This is Section B. Couple of improvements have not yet been completed. Sidewalk sections are missing on Chatwood Lane in particular and Conestoga. The site has not been stabilized. Stormwater management infrastructure not been fully installed as required. So a bond will be required for the completion of those improvements. As indicated on the plat, a couple of streets, new streets have been constructed, and the developer is making an offer for the city to accept and dedicate these streets as public streets. Chatswood Lane has been extended. It's a local street, 50 feet right of way. Another street is Conestoga Pass, that's a lane. Duncan's Rest. Let me just go back. So this is Duncan's Rest, extending from Carroll Creek Road. That will be Duncan's Rest. This is Chatswood going in. And Conestoga Pass, the dead-end street on both sides. 911 has reviewed these street names and recommended them for approval. We also checked them vis-a-vis subdivision regulations, and it meets our standards. Staff recommends that the Planning Commission approve this, subject to the developer posting a bond in the amount of $233,000 total for the completion of improvements. That will be broken down into two. I know there are two different developers on this, so it's important we put it in the record.
Question.
Section A is 206,000, and then Section B is 27,000.
Yes, sir.
So that is staff's recommendation.
Subject to the bond.
Subject to the bond, yes, sir.
Okay. All right, do we have any questions for staff? No? Seeing none, we'll go ahead and open up for public discussion, or public comment. Do you have anybody here wishing to speak for or against Duncan's Retreat subdivision request for final plat approval? If you'll give us your name and address, please, sir.
Joe Wilson, 213 Willows
see you.
Ridge Court, Johnson City. And I'm here to answer any questions that y'all might have for us. I'm one of the developers of Duncan's Retreat, and the only reason we're asking for the bond is because we've had such a wet weather season. Every time we started to put in a sidewalk, it started to rain or something, so that's why we're requesting the bondage.
Any questions? No? Thank you very much. Anybody else here wishing to speak for or against the final plat approval? Seeing no one, we'll go ahead and close the public comment and open up for discussion.
I move that we go ahead and grant final plat approval, subject to two bonds, one of $206,000 for Section A, one of $27,000 for Section B.
Thank you for saying all of that. Second. We have a second.
Second.
No further discussion. Please call the roll.
Commissioner Lowe?
Yes.
Commissioner Williamson?
Yes.
Commissioner Pavlich?
Yes.
Commissioner Wild?
Yes.
Commissioner Harrell?
Yes.
And Chairman Ziles?
Yes.
Motion approved with the posting of bond for Section A, $206,000, and B, $27,000.
Thank you, ma'am.
Mr. Chairman, I wish to request that another motion be made officially accepting those streets as public streets. By state law, by just approving the plat, you do not make them public street. You actually have to accept them by separate motion.
Really?
Yeah.
We've never done that before.
By state law, just approving a plat does not make any street in it a public street. You actually have to make that
So what
decision.
happens if we don't accept them?
Then they are private.
Make a motion, we have,
Okay, so when we accept subdivision plats, final subdivision of plats from now on, we need to say plats and designated streets.
As public streets, yes.
Just, that's all you'd have to say, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm going to make a motion that we accept the streets as designed in the plat. Have a second.
That we accept the offer of dedication as public street.
I would second that.
Okay, any discussion? Please call the roll.
Okay. Commissioner Lowe?
Yes.
Commissioner Williamson?
Yes.
Commissioner Pavlich?
yes.
Commissioner Wild?
Yes.
Commissioner Harrell?
Yes.
And Chairman Zilens.
Yes.
Motion approved.
I wonder how many private streets we have running around out there.
So we got a lot of private streets in the city.
It's, we'll have to talk more
That
about
was
that.
our
That's
chance,
interesting.
that was our chance to keep it a private street, and not have to maintain it. Why did you make that motion, Tim?
Okay, next, item number 5, final subdivision plat approval for Watauga Falls Planned Unit Development. And I'm sure you're going to tell us we need to say the same, have the same lingo in our...
No, this one, no.
So a
No.
PUD does not have the same lingo as a subdivision, okay.
The applicant in this case is not constructing any new streets.
There you go,
So
good.
we don't have any offer of
We don't have to
street.
accept the street in the front?
Any street. It's already a public street. So
Good.
we don't need any additional street. This piece of property is zone R4, medium density residential. It will permit a density of 14 dwelling units per acre. The developer proposes 7.92 dwelling units per acre. The site is still under construction. The deceleration lane, for example, has not been completed. Stormwater management infrastructure not completed, site not stabilized, and so the bond will be required for this particular subdivision. It meets all zoning ordinance requirements and subdivision requirements. Staff recommends approval subject to the posting of a bond in the amount of
$42,000.
$42,000 for the completion of improvements.
All right, thank you. Any questions for staff? Seeing none, any public comment? Seeing none, we'll go ahead and open up for motions and discussion.
I'll move that we go ahead and grant final approval for Watauga Falls Plan Unit Development, subject to posting of a $42,000 bond and not accepting any streets that we already own.
Thank you. We have a motion for approval with the bond.
Second
We
that.
have a second from Mr. Williamson. Any discussion? Seeing none, please call the roll.
Commissioner Lowe? Yes. Commissioner Williamson?
Yes.
Commissioner Pavlich?
Yes.
Commissioner Wild?
Yes.
Commissioner Harrell?
Yes.
Chairman Zilens.
Yes.
Motion approved with the posting of a bond for $42,000.
Thank you, ma'am. Item 6, final subdivision plat approval for Greenwood Planned Unit Development.
So this is a piece of property at the intersection of North Greenwood Drive, South Greenwood Drive, and Seminole Drive. The property is zone R6 for high-density residential development. It is currently vacant. There is development going on site. Infrastructure like sidewalk, site stabilization, stormwater infrastructure, these have also not been completed. Would require as-built BMP easement plats. All these need to be submitted. Staff, the plat meets all zoning ordinance requirements and subdivision regulations. Staff recommends approval of the plat subject to a bond, the amount of $30,000 for the completion of the improvements.
Thank you, sir. Any questions for staff? Seeing none, we'll go ahead and open up for public comment. Again, and seeing none, we'll go ahead and open up for discussion regarding the Greenwood Planned Unit Development Subdivision Final Plat Approval. Motions?
Motion.
to approve.
Motion, it wasn't from
That's your bond.
Commissioner
I
Wilder.
forgot the number of the
30.
bond. 30.
30,000.
30,000.
Yep.
We have a motion for approval with the bond for 30,000.
Second.
Fantastic. Any further discussion? Seeing none, we'll go ahead and call the roll.
Commissioner Lowe?
Yes.
Commissioner Williamson?
Yes.
Commissioner Pavlich?
Yes.
Commissioner Wild?
Yes.
Commissioner Harrell?
Yes.
Chairman Zilens.
Yes.
Motion approved with posting of a bond for $30,000.
Thank you very much. Moving on to the next item on the agenda, item number 7, final subdivision plat approval for the Looper property.
This property is 1.76 acres located at the intersection of Browns Mill and Hazel Avenue. Here's the property here, this one lot. The applicant proposes to divide this lot into 4 separate lots for single-family development. All the lots meet the minimum lot size requirement and the minimum lot width requirement. Street, water, and sewer are available. No new public infrastructure needs to be built. None's required. Development as proposed would accomplish infill development. Staff recommends approval.
Thank you, sir. Do you have questions for staff? No, I know there was some concern regarding sidewalk extensions in what we have here, but by our current ordinances, there is no requirement for building of sidewalks on this particular site. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Thank you. Any further questions for staff? Thank you. We'll go ahead and open up for public comment. Anybody here wishing to speak for or against this final plat approval? Seeing none, in a quiet room, we'll go ahead and open up for discussion on the board.
Make a motion to approve.
A motion for approval.
Second.
And a second. Okay, please call the roll.
Okay, Commissioner Lowe,
Yes.
Commissioner Williamson,
Yes.
Commissioner, I've lost where, I'm sorry. Commissioner Pavlich,
Yes.
Commissioner Wild,
Yes.
Commissioner Harrell,
Yes.
and Chairman Zions.
Yes.
Motion approved.
Thank you. And taking this opportunity, I'd like to say that if we can direct staff to please, from the chair, to begin to explore potential amendments to our zoning code that we could encourage sidewalk development where appropriate without stifling growth and development. So this has been looked at in the past. There might be a few places where it makes sense whenever we're connecting sidewalks and we want to avoid leaving a hole in sidewalks and whatnot without creating a burden. But we can begin to look at that, and you can bring us back some information if you don't mind.
And also check to see if there's grant opportunities for infill with infrastructure, improving infrastructure with grants.
Great question.
Great suggestion.
All right, on to other or consent items of the agenda. One was the release of a $66,000 bond for Cardinal Forest Phase 1.
Just as concern agenda item, all improvements have been completed. We just need a planning commission to say, yeah, we're okay, release the bond.
You certify that they have been, and Alan has certified that, it has been completed. Okay. Thank you very much. I have a motion for release of the bond.
Make a motion, we release the bond. Second that
Motion and a second. Please call the roll.
Commissioner Lowe,
Yes.
Commissioner Williamson,
Yes.
Commissioner Pavlich,
Yes.
Commissioner Wild,
Yes.
Commissioner Harrell,
Yes.
and Chairman Zions.
Yes.
Motion approved.
Motion for adjournment.
Make a motion, and we adjourn.
We adjourn.